So like how did that transition happen? Like from being that to how you are now with like so much research under your belt in terms of feminism, talking about it openly on social media and like just being out there. So like I want to know how that journey happened.
Yeah, and thanks so much for taking an interest in this. And I appreciate that you give like a platform for people to talk about this. You're incredible.
Thank
My journey has been long and it's still ongoing, and it's kind of rather recent, right? I grew up in this idea, in my personal idea of myself. I accepted a lot of the box that I was placed in, that like women in that world that I lived in, women were like lovely and they were incredible and they were so self-sacrificing, and that made them so amazing, and they were perfect and they were like honorary figures, and that like, and women were kind of revered for that. They were like worshipped in a sense where
you.
they were worshipped for sacrificing for their families, which I think it's fair. I think women sacrifice a lot, and we should honor that, and we should be so appreciative of what people sacrifice for. But the fact that like men don't have to, and like women are also sacrificing their careers for men, is kind of where the issue comes from. But so I believed that of myself. For years I said that I wanted to have 10 kids. And if I wanted to have 10 kids, that's still an interesting and valid opportunity. I think motherhood is a beautiful, beautiful calling and an opportunity for people. But like I was like focused on like having a career that would allow that. And it was like a small change where it's like, well, maybe I could be an engineer and still have kids. Well, maybe I could do this and still have kids. And I finally started just breaking down the benevolent sexism that I've kind of been told, that it's like, wait a second, women being honored is interesting, but how come women don't have leadership roles? How come women
Mm-hmm.
aren't invited to the table to make decisions for the entire group, for the entire church, the congregation? Women aren't invited into that room, yet they honor them. They say that they honor and love them, but they're not allowed to make decisions? Hold on, this doesn't seem fair. And it was kind of like breaking down my own benevolent sexism that I had kind of taken on to get to this point. And it's still ongoing, very much ongoing, but a lot of research. A podcast that I listen to that kind of just changed my world about this is called Breaking Down Patriarchy, and it just kind of goes through the history of feminism and like women's thoughts over time as they've progressed and they built upon it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's unfair. She said that's unfair. Okay, like maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe it is kind of unfair that women aren't in these rooms. So it's been a long journey, and still like a rather recent journey. I think I would say it's been like the past like 3 or 4 years that I've been like, okay, let's go into the history of feminism. Let's see why women are put down and how I can help and like fix that as much as I can.
Yeah, that's amazing. And obviously it is going to be a long journey because you're breaking down like generational stuff. Like in
Mm.
my family, in India, it's very conservative. But in my family, my mom, she had more accolades than my dad. She did better universities.
Wow.
Still, she wasn't allowed to work. She got married and then she wasn't allowed to work. And like motherhood was the only box that she was put in.
Right.
And then she used that sort of to make sure that I am never that way. Like since I was a child, she told me like you don't need to get married to be fulfilled. You need to have a career. You need to be financially independent. So like I think it's very different stories, but it's also about like how generations are like sort of changing, and it is a long journey. I think I would say it took my mom's entire life to get my family to
Mhm.
where we are today now with me, because I cannot even imagine like the stuff that she went through if I had to go through that stuff, right? So like
And I'm
yeah.
glad you said that this is like generational, because it is, right? So my mom didn't go to college. Her mom told her not to go to college.
Mm.
And so like then when my mom had me as a child, I wasn't given a middle name, right? So my name is JoCee Porter, no middle name. But my brother obviously has a middle name. He's Jackson Jefferson Porter. And the reason I don't have a middle name is because when, not if, I got married, my last name would become my middle name, and then I would take on my husband's last name.
Mm.
And so like my mom was part of that decision. She's the one that made that decision, and that's fine. But that's like a social construct, and like I think it's kind of strange that you like have a child and you're like already thinking about like this baby girl who's like a brand new baby girl getting married, right? And you're thinking
Mm-hmm.
about her future in terms of her marriage is like the only route, or like a guaranteed route even. And that's not true. It's not a guaranteed route. It is a common route, and it is a good route, and I am married, and it's a lovely route. I love being married, but it's not a guaranteed route. Nor should you like not give your child three names. I like have this like joke that I'm like a two named person. My brother's like a three named person. Like it's,
Yeah.
and we joke about it now. It's no big deal. But it's like she didn't know any better. But like her mom was telling her not. Her mom literally told her not to go to college, and that she
Mm-hmm.
should just get married. And it's like these are generational situations. But also, I want to talk about the systemic problems as well, or generational as well. We had laws in the U.S., and I'm going to talk about the USA because that's where I come from. The U.S. has like laws that would restrict women participation in the workforce that like were upheld by the Supreme Court. So there's this one case that I talked about in my podcast about types of sexism. The podcast is called Femme Fatale, where this guy in the 1800s, he sued because he wanted women, because women were only allowed to work so many hours a week in the laundromats. And he sued and was like, hey, you can't restrict an adult person's working hours. That doesn't make sense. And the Supreme Court upheld that they can restrict a woman's working hours because of social and physiological differences. And this was, yes, in the 1800s. Does it matter today? Yeah, it does, because these laws aren't fully overturned. There's still like limiting participation for women in the workforce because of like generational or laws from generations ago that still exist today. So it's generational on the personal level, families are experiencing it, but it's also generational on like the laws or like the systemic level, that like these laws that have lasted for a long time are still there, or are still infiltrating the minds and are still like what are being used to decide if women could work, where women could work, what jobs they can have, right? Maybe that's the reason women aren't sanitation workers, not because like of anything else. Maybe just there's rules against it.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Go Girl podcast. For more such inspiring conversations, do not forget to subscribe. You can also follow me on Instagram at Japnit Ahuja. Until next time, keep being unstoppable. You go, girl.